Have you ever had a moment where you knew exactly what to do, but you just didn't do it? Not because you didn't understand, not because you didn't have the information, but because something in you hesitated. Fear, uncertainty, risk, and you stayed stuck. Because sometimes the biggest gap in our lives is not between ignorance and knowledge, it's between knowledge and action. If you've ever felt like that, then this episode's for you. Welcome to Faith in the Friction, a podcast about finding strength, resilience, and hope in difficult places. I'm Sean Smith here in the T.W. Lewis Studio 42, and today we're talking about something most of us don't really like to admit. Sometimes we're not stuck because we don't know what to do. We're stuck because we're not doing what we know. I remember a moment that made that really clear for me. We were on a missions trip in Mexico with a group of high school students. I was leading them, and we were just outside of Tijuana, working in what was literally a garbage dump. Families were living there in structures made of cardboard, scrap wood, plywood, and we were there to build them two homes. Real homes with concrete floors, real walls, doors, windows, a solid roof. We were giving them something stable, something safe. The students were working hard. It was meaningful. It was emotional. You could feel that we were doing something that really mattered. But then the weather shifted. It started to rain. Now, listen, this may come as a surprise to you, but the roads in the poorest parts of Tijuana are not the best maintained. They're dirt roads, not pavement, not gravel, plain exposed dirt. And if you've ever been in that kind of environment, you know rain changes everything. The ground turns quickly. The roads don't drain. Mud takes over. And it became pretty clear fast that this wasn't just an inconvenience. This could become dangerous. So the missions organization we were working with made the call. We had to evacuate, stop the building, leave the site. There was disappointment, but they would send another team in a few days to finish the homes. The students were discouraged. We all were. We weren't done with our project. We wanted to finish what we started. But there was also this tension in the air because the situation didn't feel completely safe anymore. So we loaded up into our 15-passenger vans and started making our way out. Dirt roads, rain picking up, mud getting thicker by the minute. And as we came to the bottom of a hill, the van got stuck. Not slightly stuck, completely stuck. Tires spinning, mud flying, no movement. Now we're sitting there in the rain, in the mud, with a van full of students in a place that already felt unstable, and we're not going anywhere. So we start trying everything. Hit the gas, pedal to the floor, nothing. Rock the van back and forth, we're still stuck. Have people get out and push, which mostly just made everyone muddy and didn't move the van at all. And you can feel the tension rising because now it's not just inconvenient. Now it's starting to feel like, what's going to happen if we can't get out of here? We're a long way from the safety of our camp and we're not going anywhere. Then some locals came over to help. They were watching these crazy Americans covered in mud, trying to get their van up the hill. And they said something that made absolutely no sense. They said, you need to let air out of the tires. And I remember thinking, that sounds like a terrible idea. Because in my mind, less air means more stuck. Or worse, now we're just stuck in the mud with flat tires. It felt like a risk. It seemed like it might make a bad situation into a terrible situation. But we were already stuck, So we took the risk. We let some air out of the tires and tried again. A little bit of movement. So we let a little bit more air out, more movement. And slowly the van started to move. We got unstuck and we got up the hill. And once we got to paved roads, we drove on those semi-flat tires until we could find a place to fill them back up. And I've thought about that moment many times since, because sometimes getting unstuck requires doing something that feels risky, sometimes uncomfortable. Sometimes it doesn't make immediate sense. And most of the time, we already know what that step is. We just haven't taken it. Growth doesn't come from knowledge. It comes from action. You can know what to do and still stay stuck. You can have insight and not experience movement, because transformation doesn't happen when you understand something. It happens when you step into it. This is what Hebrews 12 talks about. It talks about running with endurance, letting go of what weighs us down, or maybe we should say what keeps us stuck, fixing our eyes forward. There's movement in that passage. It's not about standing still. It's not about understanding more. It's about running. The truth is, you may be more stuck than you are confused. A lot of us say things like, I just don't know what to do. And sometimes that's true, but often if we slow down and get honest with ourselves, we do know. We know the conversation we've been avoiding. We know the boundary we need to set. We know the habit that needs to change. We know the step that we've been putting off. It's not a knowledge problem, it's an action problem. And here's what makes this tricky. The longer we delay action, the more we convince ourselves we're confused. We overthink it, we analyze it, we research it, we pray about it again and again and again and again. Not because we need more clarity, but because we're hoping for a version of the answer that feels easier. But Hebrews talks about running, about movement, about forward motion, not standing still trying to gain perfect clarity. At some point, faith moves. And I've seen this in my own life. Moments where I kept saying, I'm still trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure life out. When deep down, I knew exactly what the next step was. I just didn't want to take it, because taking it would cost something: comfort, control, certainty. Clarity often comes after movement, not before it. And sometimes the most honest prayer we can pray is not, God, show me what to do, but God, give me the courage to do what I already know. Because action often feels risky. Letting air out of those tires felt wrong. It felt like we were making the situation worse. And that's what action often feels like. It doesn't feel safe. It feels exposed, because action requires you to step before you have guarantees. Have the conversation and risk how it's received. Set the boundary and risk disappointing. Take the opportunity and risk failing. Be honest about where you are and risk being seen by everyone. Faith has always involved risk. Not reckless risk, but relational trust. Trust that God meets us in the motion, not just in intention. Hebrews says to run with endurance, fixing our eyes forward. You can't run and stay safe at the same time. Running requires commitment. It involves being all in, movement, momentum. And here's what I've learned. Most of the steps that change your life feel uncomfortable at first. They stretch you, they challenge you, they force you into new ground. But discomfort is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. Often, It's a sign that you're doing something new. And if you wait until it feels easy, you may never move at all, because growth rarely feels comfortable in the moment. It feels like stretching. It feels uncertain. It feels like risk. But staying stuck has a cost. It just feels safer. Here's the thing. Small action creates momentum. When we were stuck in that mud, we didn't need the perfect plan. We didn't need to solve everything. We needed movement. And movement didn't happen all at once. Let some air out. Try again. Let a little bit more out. Feel a little shift. Try again. And eventually, momentum started to build. That's how change works. Not all at once. Not in one big breakthrough, but in small, repeated steps. And this is where a lot of people get stuck, because they think, if I can't fix everything, I won't do anything. If I can't solve the whole problem, I won't start. But you don't need a full solution. You need a next step. One conversation, one decision, one action. Hebrews talks about laying aside what weighs us down. That's not a one-time decision. That's a repeated practice, letting go, taking a step and moving forward. And here's what's powerful about small steps. They create momentum, and momentum changes how things feel. What once felt impossible starts to feel manageable. What once felt overwhelming starts to feel actionable. You don't have to win the whole race today. You don't have to figure out the entire path. You don't even have to feel ready. You just have to move. Because momentum doesn't come through thinking. It comes from action. Let me say something that might feel a little bit uncomfortable. Sometimes we don't take a step, not because we don't know what to do, but because staying stuck feels safer, even when it's unhealthy, even when it's frustrating, even when it's chaotic. It's familiar. And there's a strange kind of comfort in the familiar chaos. You know how it works. You know how to navigate it. You know what to expect. Even if it's not good, it's predictable. And predictable feels safe. Taking a next step means stepping into the unknown. It means risking failure. It means risking discomfort. It means risking change. And for a lot of us, that feels more threatening than staying stuck. So we stay in cycles. Cycles we don't like, but cycles we understand. We stay in patterns that frustrate us, but don't require us to change. We delay the conversation, avoid the decision, postpone the step, not because we can't move, but because movement requires courage. And at some point, we have to be honest with ourselves. Stuck is not just something happening to us. Sometimes it's something we are choosing. And I say that carefully but clearly, because if we don't acknowledge that, we'll keep waiting for something external to change when the next step is actually ours to take. There have been so many moments in my life where I knew what the next step was, and I delayed it, overthought it, avoided it. And the longer I waited, the heavier it felt. But almost every time I finally acted, it wasn't as impossible as it felt. And even when it was hard, it moved me forward. Let's come back to Hebrews for just a second, because this is where it gets really clear. Hebrews doesn't suggest something. It commands something. It doesn't say, consider running. It doesn't say, when you feel ready, start moving. It doesn't say, take your time and figure it out. It says, run. Run with endurance. It's not passive. It's not theoretical. That's action. Let go of what's weighing you down, what's keeping you stuck. Fix your eyes forward and move. So let me ask you a direct question. What are you waiting for? More clarity? More confidence? A better moment? How long have you been standing at the starting line, knowing what you need to do and not doing it? Because at some point, waiting isn't wisdom anymore. It's avoidance. At some point, more thinking isn't helping, it's delaying. And at some point, you don't need another message, another podcast, another conversation. You need to move. Hebrews doesn't say understand the race. It says run it. So run. If you're feeling stuck right now, there's a good chance you don't need more information. You need to take a step. One step. Not the full journey, not the full plan, not the full solution, just the next step. And I know that step might feel risky. It might feel uncomfortable. It might not make perfect sense yet. But neither did letting the air out of those tires. Everything in me thought, this is going to make it worse. This is going to create a whole new problem. But that step was the very thing that got us unstuck. And some of you already know what your step is. You've been thinking about it. You've been avoiding it. Waiting for it to feel easier, waiting for more clarity. But clarity doesn't always come before movement. Sometimes it comes after. We didn't sit in the mud waiting for better conditions. We acted, and movement followed our action. So maybe the question isn't, what else do I need to know? Maybe the question is, what step do I already know I need to take? Send the message. Have the conversation. Take the step. Ask for some help. Start the process. You don't need to fix everything today. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to move. Because growth doesn't come from what you know, it comes from what you do. And when you take that step, even when it feels uncertain, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it feels risky, you may find it's the very thing that finally gets you unstuck. You don't need to figure everything out. You just need to take the next step and trust that God will meet you in the movement. He will meet you there. Thanks for listening to Faith in the Friction. If this episode has encouraged you or inspired you in some way, I'd invite you to share it with someone who might need to take a next step, someone who might be stuck. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.